Hi everyone, welcome. This is session 3 of Fish and Chips, Fish and cChips. Um, I have a presentation, but it's a short presentation. I probably going to use the software more than anything else. Let's see how far we get. I have no idea how long this is going to take and how far we're going to get. This is as new to me than it is to you, so it's all a beautiful experiment. Um, in case you weren't here last time, so forum.callassoftware.com. If you have questions, put them there. That is probably the easiest. You can obviously always send me email and ask that way, but it is probably easiest to put things on the forum, and this at least gives you the URL to that. So just forum.callassoftware.com. And then let's get going. This is what I would like to do. It doesn't sound like a lot, but I have a feeling that by the time we get through it, it will be a lot. But we'll see. So I'd like to talk about the engine a little bit and start showing you how that works. That's the first part. And then I'd also like to introduce templates, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. I'm trying to do this slowly. If that is frustrating, I apologize, but I hope that by doing it slowly, I can actually get you to the point that you can do meaningful things with this afterwards. And I know from experience that that is not necessarily that easy. So feedback welcomed. If you think it's too quick or too slow or whatever, just tell me. So what I want to cover first, and last time we talked about the underlying technologies, HTML, CSS, JavaScript. I also shared some of the differences between sorry, I can't do multitasking. I'm opening the chat window here on my side as well, so I can see if you guys type something. But feel free to speak up also, of course. But so last time we covered the basic technologies, and then we also looked at the things that were different between what you would do when you make a website and what you do when you make a template for this fish and chips technology. And there were quite a few things. I was actually more than I anticipated. So we talked about that. What I want to talk about today to start is how does this work? Because I kind of might have lied a little bit to you. Maybe not lied, but let's call it simplified things a little bit. And this is a slide I showed during the first session. The reason for this fish and chips technology is pre-flight reports, custom pre-flight reports. So Callas wanted to make it easy for users to create nice PDF pre-flight reports. And rather than make their own templating engine, they thought, oh, why don't we integrate an HTML engine? But this picture is a little bit on the simplified side. So what you see here is there has been pre-flight, and that gives us a pre-flight result. That's what you have in this result window on the left-hand side. And then what it says is, oh, from this we create a nice result. Now, there are actually two things going on in this process, and it's important to understand which they are and then look at the details. This is a better representation if you want. And don't look too much at the titles. It's difficult to really come up with a title that fits it. But, and I mean the pre-flight results and create report stuff and so on. But the steps are important. So yes, you have these pre-flight results on the left-hand side. That is what you get when you do pre-flight, right? pdfToolbox does pre-flight and it comes up with a list, a database, whatever it is, of pre-flight result information. And somehow, and this is the part that was kind of hidden in the simplified slide, somehow we now have a template that gets converted into a PDF report. Now, the template is HTML and CSS and JavaScript. That's what we said last time. But how do you get the pre-flight results into this template? The template cannot be static, right? I mean, if you have a static template, it will always generate the same content. So somehow you need to inject information into this template. And this is an important part of the process, and it has some consequences. And the first consequence also has performance consequences, if you want, or repercussions. Because if my template is not static and each time I use it, I have to inject other data, then the template is going to have to be copied each time it is used. And that is actually what happens when you look at Preflight templates, or you look at place content templates, or even pdfChip templates. These things are copied. There is a temporary copy that is made, and in that temporary copy, the variables, in this case, Preflight results, are inserted, and then that copy is converted into a PDF document. If you wouldn't do that, and pdfToolbox would use your templates twice at the same time, which it can. I mean, pdfToolbox does 8 processes in parallel by default on a machine. There would be a risk that these things start to interact with each other. So whenever place content is run or preflight is generated, that template is copied, and then into the template something happens. And what I want to do is look a little bit at what happens in there. Okay, and so if my template is HTML and my preflight results are JSON, that's how they are represented here, how do I get this information into this HTML template? It is not that difficult, and I'm going to, for a second, forget about this, and we're going to go to pdfToolbox. It is not that difficult, but unfortunately, we have been talking about 3 different use cases for this HTML to PDF technology: preflight reports, place content, and pdfChip. And unfortunately, the way that these things are combined is different in all 3 cases. Why? That's a very good question. Partially because I think the use case is different, but also partially because between the invention of this technology for preflight reports and then the integration into pdfToolbox as place content, there were quite a few years. So things changed a little bit. Probably the developers who implemented this became smarter, at least you would hope so. And so things changed. And that means that today, if you want to make preflight report, or you want to make a place content template, well, the templating technology is the same. It's HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, but the way the integration works is slightly different. And so you have to know which of these things you want to do if you want to be able to use it. And what I'm going to do is show you how that integration works in all 3 of these cases. That should not take all that long, I think. And then probably from the next time on, if we really start developing something, then I'm going to use place content going forward. So I'm going to choose one of these 3 methods, and it's going to be place content. But remember that if you want to do one of the other 2 things, you might have to, realize that the integration way is slightly different. And there is documentation for all of that, and we can talk about where to find the documentation and so on, but yeah. So the first thing is preflight reports. That's what we started with. And so in order to show you what happens, let me just do preflights, of course, with 2022 preflight profile from the Ghent workgroup, obviously. And so I can do create reports, and then in this thing, I have the template, and this is a standard library, so there is only one template, the default one. And if I want to see it, I can click on Browse. And that opens up a folder, and that folder has the templates, all the templates. So in that folder, you have something called Overview. That is a template. If I would have multiple templates, I would have multiple subfolders in here. So how does this work? Well, if you open this template folder, and maybe I should do what I said last time. So do I still have Visual Studio Code open? No. So let me open that. And then I don't want this one. I'm just going to create a new window. And I'm going to drag this whole template on there so that we can look at this folder. So this overview thing is a Preflight folder. Does it fit on screen? Yes, great. And I'll try not to obscure it too much. So this is a Preflight folder, and then or a Preflight report template folder. And then I have an HTML file in there, I have a manifest in there, and so on. So that's all cool, but we're not going to talk too much about it other than this is just HTML, right? And it includes some CSS, it includes some JavaScript. We've talked a little bit about how that works last time. So this is about what you would expect. There is an HTML file here that is going to be converted into a PDF. Where is the Preflight result data? Well, if I open the scripts subfolder, then there is a file called calls_params.js. And you can tell that this name was invented by a developer, right? And this file is not really part, it's a JSON file. So you can see, it's not, I think, strictly a JSON file. It's a JavaScript file with some JavaScript objects defined in it. Strictly speaking, this does not make part of my template. It's not part of my template. What do I mean with that? Well, every time I do Preflight, this subfolder, if it doesn't exist in my template, is going to be created by pdfToolbox. So pdfToolbox is automatically going to create a folder, a subfolder called scripts in my template. Well, strictly speaking, it is first going to copy my template into a temporary location, and then it is going to create the scripts subfolder if it doesn't exist. And then it is going to overwrite the file that is called calls_params. Calls comes from callas, obviously. And this file contains the Preflight information. And you can see at the top of the file, there is a comment that says, don't modify this because this will be overwritten. And if I scroll down a little bit and we go to, for example, let's take calls docinfo, that's a good example. So this calls docinfo variable is going to be set by pdfToolbox to the information of the actual document that I preflighted, right? So I preflight, I generate a report. pdfToolbox copies my report template, it creates the scripts folder if it doesn't exist, and then it writes or overwrites the calls_params.js. And it fills it with all of the information about the actual preflight that just happens. So it fills it with information about the document, it will fill it with information about the preflight that was just done, about the errors that were found and the warnings that were found, and so on and so on. And once this calls_params is written, then and only then will pdfToolbox look at the index.html file and start to convert it into a PDF report. And so what you see in this HTML, and you should see this for every Preflight report template that exists or that you create, is the inclusion of that file, scripts/calls_params. By including it, my HTML or the JavaScript, the rest of the JavaScript, can now read the information in this calls param, right? And by reading that, it has access to the preflight information, and then that preflight information is used to, well, put in my report. So the stuff that you see in the preflight report in the PDF is the stuff that comes from this calls params file. Can you make a preflight report template without this? Well, yes, but then it's going to be static, or at least you will not be able to use information from preflight in it, and that makes the whole thing more or less useless. So if you want to make a preflight report template, then you need to know that in the scripts folder you have this file, and that file is going to be dynamically created each time a preflight happens, and you should get your information from that file. And then if you would look at these other scripts, all of this other stuff that comes from or that is present in the default template that callas provides, then you'll see that a lot of this stuff comes from this callas params JS. How to update this file? Well, you don't have to update it. You can't update it. What you will do is just read from it. pdfToolbox updates it. You just read from it, right? And so the scripts that you see here, and that is what you see in this HTML. So I have, for example, let me try and find a good example, simple and good example. I think this one here. So I have here in my document, in my HTML, I have a section where I want to list the name of the PDF file that was preflighted. Well, that name is stored in calls doc info, and then docs0, which is the PDF file that was preflighted, and then the file name of that document. And this calls doc info is available as a variable in JavaScript because I included calls params. And if I would look in calls params, then we have here calls doc info, and that has an array with documents. So I'm interested in document 0, which is this one. And then I have in there, I have, for example, file name. And that gives me the name of the PDF file that was preflighted, right? And in the default template, you will find some information in there, but each time you preflight, that information will be modified. And so if I would preflight the document I have open, my my doc, this calls params would then have backpage, business cards backpage at the front PDF. So that would be inserted in the file name, and then in my template I can use that. Right? So this file is, if you want, the go-between between the Preflight engine in pdfToolbox and your template. pdfToolbox creates it, your template uses it. And you should never, ever modify it yourself because, well, I can modify whatever I want in this file, and I can even save it, and I'm not scared to do so because every time I preflight it will be rewritten anyway. So whatever you have in here is really not that important. Okay, so let me close this again and let's go back to pdfToolbox. So that's how it works for preflight reports. And like I said, there is documentation for this. You will find this on help.callassoftware.com, but that's how it works for preflight reports. Now, let's look at how it works for place content, and let me show you mostly that it is slightly different. And then we'll look at the details a lot more once we start making place content templates. How do I show you that it is different? Well, I can go to create fixup, and then here we will search for place, and then place content on page, which is the full version of the place content fixup, the one that uses HTML templates. And so again, I have an option to open configuration files, just as I had for Preflight report templates. These configuration files or these templates live somewhere else. So same system, pdfToolbox opens a folder. Each of the subfolders in there is a template. And that template can be used in place content on page. And what do we have in there? I'm going to do the same trick, new window, and then I'm going to drag one of them on here, and I have a folder. And again, that folder contains a manifest.xml, and we will talk about what exactly that does. It contains an index.html, which is the HTML that is converted. You can guess who made the template. And then this time, I am not looking in the scripts folder, but I will point out that there is a folder, a subfolder called callas_temp. And this is very similar than what we saw for Preflight reports. This subfolder is created automatically by pdfToolbox. So each time I run this place content fixup, pdfToolbox again creates a copy of my template, and then it inserts the callas_temp folder if it doesn't exist. And then in there is a file called calsdocinfo.js, and that is now written by pdfToolbox. So just as for Preflight reports, we had this cals_params.js, here I have calsdocinfo.js. Why are these names not the same? Good question. I have no idea. But the purpose of these files is the same, right? So when I use place content, my template might actually want to know things about the file it is supposedly adding stuff to. Well, it has to know things. For example, I'm pretty sure that I'm going to want to know what the trim box is of the page I'm adding stuff to, because in many cases, I'm going to want to do positioning based on where the trim box is and how big the document is. I may want to know things like what colors do I have in this file, how many separations do I have, and so on and so on. So there is stuff that is very useful to know when you are running a place content template. And so pdfToolbox gives you this calsdocinfo element, and that contains all of that information. If I go to my HTML for my templates, you can see here, included in my HTML is callas_temp calsdocinfo.js. So just as with the Preflight report template, where I import that temporary file that is written by pdfToolbox, here I import this calsdocinfo file. And that gives me access in my HTML and in the JavaScript in my HTML, for example, all of these things, that gives me access to the information about the document. So the methodology between these two is very much the same, but the exact implementation is slightly different. Specifically, the location where this file is, that is used for communication purposes, and the name of the file is slightly different. Yeah, but once you understand how this works for place content template and how you can get to the information and use it, it should be fairly simple to translate that into what you do in a pre-flight scenario, for example. Okay, so that's the second step here is how does this work for the place content template? Now, there's a third way, as I said, and that is pdfChip. And pdfChip, as you know, is a command line version of the place content or HTML to PDF-based technology in from Callas. Yeah, so it's a third way, and again, it works differently And in many ways, it is much cleaner because this is a command line tool. I don't start from a PDF document. I just generate PDF from scratch. And so things are slightly easier and better defined. And how can I show you that? Well, if I use the command line to run pdfChip, there is a help command. You have the same thing for pdfToolbox. So if you use pdfToolbox CLI, you can also use -- help, and that gives you all of the different parameters that you can use. For pdfChip, it is the same. And so then it tells you to run this, you would do pdfChip, and then you have some input file, and then it generates an output file, and then you have a bunch of parameters that you can use, and then you have a list of the parameters that you can use. And the one that I'm interested in here is this one. So when I run pdfChip, I can say -- import, and then give that a name, and then I point it to a JSON file. And the result of that is that in my HTML template, in the JavaScript in my HTML template, I can refer to a JavaScript object that is called cChip.user. And then this name thing that I have in my command line. So I've written for a project a long time ago, I've written something that takes data from an invoicing system and then generates invoices in PDF. And so my command line looked like -- import equals invoice, colon, and then the path to the JSON file. And this can be an absolute path, but it typically can also be a path that is part of the template. And so that meant that in my template for that project, I could go in JavaScript to cChip.user.invoice whatever I had in this JSON file. So I had immediate access in that way to whatever was in that imported JSON file. That's a very easy way of doing things. But because this is a pdfChip and you're just running this template and you're not starting from a PDF document, I can also do other things, and I could, from the template that I write, just immediately open a certain file that lives somewhere on the file system if I know where it is, and so on. So I have a little bit more freedom in that case. But so for pdfChip, and that is maybe the important part to remember, it is not so that pdfChip writes a file for you. Why? Well, there is nothing to write. I'm not doing Preflight, so this thing can not generate Preflight results on the fly. I'm also not decorating a PDF file, so pdfToolbox cannot write a JSON file with all the information from the document that I'm decorating. So those things are not possible. I'm just starting from scratch. And so if I want to inject anything into this template, then I have to specify it using this command line parameter. On top of that, there are certainly use cases where you don't have to do that for pdfChip. If I have HTML or SVG and I just want to convert a static HTML or a static SVG or an HTML that is generated by some other system, maybe Switch, or maybe some kind of a web content management system, CMS, that's the word I was looking for. So if I have a CMS that generates a dynamic HTML for me, then I can use pdfChip to convert that into a PDF. And I might not want to inject additional data into that. That's a completely legal use case if you want to use it that way. So using this import parameter is optional, but you can do it. I hope that makes sense. So 3 different ways that this technology is used within pdfToolbox and pdfChip. And the kind of thing that you would do, namely having a file with data, JavaScript/JSON data, and then importing that in the template so that the template can use it, the way that happens is similar, but the way it's implemented is slightly different, right? And so from this point on, for the remainder of this course, whatever we do with it, I'm going to focus to begin with on place content, and we're going to use that. And so I will use the second way of interfacing with pdfToolbox. But we can definitely at some point, if someone is interested, also look in more detail at an example of a Preflight report template or something with pdfChip. But we have to choose, and decorating PDFs is kind of the nicest use case. It's also in some ways the more complex use case, where you have to explain most about coordinate systems and what happens with page sizes and stuff like that. So that's what I'm going to use in the remainder of the classes. So that's about interfacing with between the template and the tool. And so what we now need to do is figure out how do we get started with this. And there are two ways you can get started, and I'm probably only going to show you one, or at least I'm going to advise very, very strongly that you use one. And that is using a template. And in order to do so, we need to go to a browser. So let me go to Safari, and in Safari, and you can follow along if you want, that would make total sense. In Safari, what you do is you go to github.com and then you go to callas software. So github.com/callas software, and that will bring you to this page, which is maintained by callas. And the useful stuff on there, I believe not everything is as useful. I think the useful stuff on there is this section, Preflight report, which we are going to ignore because I was not going to use that. And then place content, and this is what we're going to look at. And then the other thing, even though I'm not very much into Docker necessarily, but there is also a part of a part of code that is shared by callas that refers to using pdfToolbox in a Docker environment. And if you haven't done that, there is also documentation on this. So pdfToolbox, the CLI, can run on a Docker image, which allows you to run it in environments where, for example, these Docker images are dynamically created and so on. Amazon has this Elastic Container Service, I believe it is called ECS. Everything is Elastic for Amazon. So it has this ECS service that allows you to host Docker images and create them on the fly and stuff like that. If you work with pdfToolbox and Docker, then this could be useful, and there is documentation about how to do that as well. But callas publishes Docker images to get you started quickly. And I think the website is called Docker Hub. I'm not 100% sure. So what we're interested in here is the place content part. And the place content part gives you a number of examples. You actually also have them in the product. These templates are part of, which library is it? So if I go to pdfToolbox and I would go to one of the standard libraries, and I think it is shapes, variables, JavaScript, and place content. And then you will see these things here as well. So for example, place CMYK color bar should be exactly, so that's place content on page fix up, and the template used is add color bar CMYK. And if I look here, then there is something called add color bar CMYK. So that is that template. I like using this from here because this allows me to examine what is in there and quickly look something up and so on. If you want to start with it, what you can do is either you copy one of the existing templates, which you can do in pdfToolbox, because as I just showed, they live there, so that's not a big issue. What you can also do is for this repository, I can download it as a zip file, or you can use GitHub Desktop or one of the Git CLI tools or something like that to get a copy of that and clone it, whatever it's called. I have to admit that the whole Git universe for me sounds like black magic all the way, and I've never been able to wrap my head around that. But so the easiest thing that you can do, and if you want to follow along, then I will do that. The easiest thing that you can do is you go to this green code button. You only have that, I believe, if you're at the level of a repository. So if I'm at place content, or if I would go to Preflight report, I should have the same thing here. So this is also templates, but then for the Preflight reports. So go to that repository level and then click on the green button and do download. And what that will get you, let me see if I can go back to that. So what that gets you is not this. I don't have a lot of screen real estate here. So this is what I was looking for. So the download that you get will look like this. You have a README file at the highest level that gives some explanation. This is what you have to do on GitHub. And then I have subfolders. And the subfolder that interests me the most is this template folder. And then we can do again what we already did. So we use Visual Studio Code and we drag that folder onto the window, and that gives me access to the complete template. Okay. Are you forced to use the templates? Well, no, of course not. Place content and the Preflight engine and so on use or can use arbitrary HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. So you could literally start from scratch. The only thing that you will not be able to change is what we talked about before, and that's the integration mechanism. So can I replace all of these files here? Yes, but as soon as you use the template, pdfToolbox is still going to create this callas_temp and write the docinfo file in it. That you cannot change, but you can definitely throw away everything else. So what is all of this other stuff? And I'm going to probably take about 10 more minutes to talk about that and give you a little bit of an insight. And that will be it for today, I think. But what is all of that stuff? Well, some of it is important, and you should definitely use it the way it is. Other things are there because I thought this was a nice way of organizing things, but feel free to do it differently. So the important bits, well, you have a README file here, but we can just as well delete that. That's just a README file. The important bits are you need to have a manifest.xml file, and this is a communication file between you and pdfToolbox. So you can actually add stuff in there that will prompt pdfToolbox to give you more information in this cal's docinfo file that it generates. So it always generates this cal's docinfo file, always. But it might not give you all of the information. For example, this one has complete ink information set to false. And that means I don't have a list of, because it's set to false, pdfToolbox has not generated a list of separation information, so color information. In the manifest file for my templates, I can include something like this ink coverage thing or ink info, and there are some parameters. The documentation tells you what they are, but I can include these things in my manifest, and if I include them in the manifest, then pdfToolbox will give me extra information in cal's docinfo. Why does it work this way? Well, how do you generate accurate color information for a PDF file? You will have to render it, and then you look at what separations were created, and that gives you the information that you were looking for, right? Now, rendering a PDF file takes time. Not every place content template that I create needs that information. So it would be stupid to always generate the information and take time that is then not used, right? If I make a place content template that just adds a little bit of information. And when you look at the examples in pdfToolbox, there are plenty of examples for that. If I have a place QR code that is based on a template, or I have a, I don't know, place a fixed color bar, or place a page number, all of these things use place content templates, or in many cases actually can use place content templates, but none of these would need accurate color information from the document that is added to, at least not in most cases. So why would you generate all of this color information if it's then not used? So in order to solve that problem or make it more flexible, what callas said was, well, in the manifests, you can decide what you want. If I don't want that information, then I can just comment it out. And now pdfToolbox will not use the time to render the file. I'm lying, it probably will still do it. I also have to comment out the other one that is related to color. So now pdfToolbox will not take the time to render the document and calculate all of the color information and write that in cal's docinfo. And that is much better because I don't need it anyway. But if I needed, all I have to do is make sure that these things are present. pdfToolbox will read that, will know that you need that information, and it will generate that and write it into cal's docinfo. So this is a communication mechanism between your templates and the product. And when you would look at templates for Preflight reports, you will see the same thing. And in Preflight reports, it is a lot more extensive because there is a lot more stuff that you can ask pdfToolbox to generate for you. Things like thumbnails, for example, or things like images for individual separations, or ink coverage previews, or there is a very long list of things that you potentially can use in Preflight reports. And if you want to use them, you have to make sure that your manifest.xml file asks pdfToolbox to generate it for you. Okay, so this is an important file, and you will see it in all templates, and you will, at least you should understand what these things do, and you should minimize the information that you ask for if you have a very simple template. And by doing so, that is going to make pdfToolbox run your place content fix up quicker. Because we're talking about rendering, make no mistake that this can make a significant amount of difference in execution speed, right? Especially if you have, for example, large format files, sign and display, where you have really big files and so on, only ask for the information that you're really interested in. So this is the first thing. That's this manifest.xml. That is an important part. The second thing is you need a file that is going to be converted by pdfToolbox. And this can be, and in most cases will be, an index.html file. Actually, the name is not that important. If there is an HTML file at the highest level, then pdfToolbox is going to take that one and convert it and assume that that is the decorations that you want to add. What happens if I don't have that? Well, that's actually an interesting question. And if we go back to, so this is my folder with all of the the subfolders, and each subfolder here is a template. That's what I said, right? And when you look in them, each of them has a manifest.xml and an index.html. So that's about what you expect. Now, what happens when I do this? So I'll make a folder and we'll call it add penguin. And then let's see if I have an image with a penguin. Nobody is going to be surprised that the answer is yes. So let me see. There, nice penguin. So I take this and I put that into this folder. Okay, so now I have a template folder that only contains a PDF file. Is pdfToolbox happy with that? Well, let's see. Create fixup, go to place content, and look at the list of, I'm not right, this is not the right folder, is it? This is not the right library, I think. I think I was here when I did that. Why do I shoot myself in the foot like that? Place content. Let's see if I have the right one now. Doesn't look like it. Okay, we'll do something else. I'm in my in the downloaded template, of course. That's not going to work. So here is my add penguin folder, and now it's in the right library. So I have to tell pdfToolbox to refresh this list. So we're going to go back and say place content again. And oh, come on, don't be annoying. It's there. Am I not seeing it now? Or am I? Okay, let's do this. Once you start messing things up, it's going to continue. Here we go, add penguin. So that folder that I just created called add penguin that only has a PDF file in it is actually quite valid. There is nothing wrong with that according to pdfToolbox. And you could think, oh, but it's because it hasn't used it yet and it hasn't analyzed the whole thing. No, no, it will work just fine. And it's probably not going to work very well here because the sizes don't match and stuff. So, but you can see that it actually adds the penguin to this document. So it works. And that is a general thing. So do I need to have always an HTML file that is converted? No, you need a file that pdfToolbox can convert to PDF, and that is then added on top of um, the original document. And if I give it a PDF, that is going to work. If I give it an SVG, that is going to work. If I put a PNG or a JPEG in that folder, that is also going to work. In fact, if I put a Word document in there, it is also, I wouldn't advise you to do so, but it is also going to work. Okay, so any file type that pdfToolbox can convert is going to work as a place content template. And that can be useful. An SVG file, for example, can make a very useful template. Of course, you don't have all the same capabilities. We don't have JavaScript and whatever, but it is still usable to add something on top of an existing document. You have to be a little bit careful. Careful about what? Well, let me say that I have two PDF files in there. File 2. Now what happens? Well, now it's kind of undefined because now I have two primary files in that folder. Both of them are usable for pdfToolbox. So when you run this, pdfToolbox is just going to select one of them. And if I would have to guess, I would say that it looks at them alphabetically probably and just takes the first one, but it could also be just the first one that happened to be copied into this folder or whatever, right? So make sure that you only have one primary file. So don't put a combination of a PDF and an HTML, or a PDF and an SVG, or a PNG and an SVG. That's just asking for trouble. And so if you, this is much better, if you have a template, make sure that you have an HTML file at the highest level. And then if you have other files that pdfToolbox also supports, put them in a subfolder. So if I would have a logo or whatever here, I would make a subfolder called images, and then I can put my logos in there, and that allows me to reference them from my HTML, quite simple, and it doesn't cause confusion for pdfToolbox. So make sure that if we're working with an HTML template, you can have this XML, you should, this manifest XML, but make sure that you only have one HTML file there, so that pdfToolbox knows what to do. Does it need to be named index.html? No, you can do whatever you want. But this is a nice, yeah, it's what people tend to do, so this is nice. So these two files are important. We know that we can now also use other things. Everything else, except for the callas temp, so actually these things are, let me clean up a little bit. This and this and this, those things are important, and we probably shouldn't change. Yeah, the manifest.xml file needs to have that name. Index.html can be something else, but let's just call it index.html and not confuse ourselves. And this callas_temp is going to be created by pdfToolbox, so we can't change it. So these things are fixed. The other elements in your template are up to what you think makes sense. And so what have we done in the template? What is the convention in the template? Well, the convention is that everything that lives under callas library is fixed. That is stuff that callas has provided. I have written most of it. I'm not sure I've written all of it, but most of it. And you should not change it. Yeah. Are you allowed to change it? Yes, you can do whatever the hell you want in the end, but you probably shouldn't change it. And if you intend to at some point go back to GitHub and download the latest version of something, then not changing callas_library makes it so that you can take this latest version and just use it. So don't modify anything in there. What you have in there is example fonts. If you don't need them, then you can delete them at some point. There is some of the style stuff, and we talked about this during the last video. So this is some of the cleanup CSS stuff. And then there is also a bunch of scripts, and we will talk much more about those scripts in the next session. But all these things are part of the library, and you should not modify it. If you have your own CSS for this project, so if I want to do what we did in the last video, I want all the text that I add to the PDF to be read, then that is something that I would take in my own CSS file in here. And this actually doesn't turn it red, it turns all the text, all the paragraph elements, CMYK black, right? And so in the styles folder, you should put all of the CSS stuff that is specific to the project you are working on, as opposed to the CSS that is part of the library. Same for scripts. Here I have a script. Look at that, written by me. Here I have a script that is specific to this project, this template that I am creating, as opposed to the scripts that are part of the library that are support scripts, utility scripts, right? And images and whatever, you can have a font folder in there if you want. So you make whatever folders you want, just don't modify the ones under callas libraries so that we keep some separation between the two. Okay. So I think that is what I wanted to cover today. So what we've done is, just to recap, we've looked at how does pdfToolbox or pdfChip integrate with an HTML template and with the extra data that you need, whether it's Preflight results or document information, or in pdfChip, any kind of other data that you want to inject and use in the template. How does that mechanism work? And what we've seen is that there are 3 different mechanisms, in fact. And for the details, refer to the video later, or look it up in the documentation, help.callassoftware.com. There is documentation on each of these 3 things there. And I should find the links, and then I'll give you the links. So we've seen how that works. And then the second part of the video was, where do you start from? And so what I said is, we're going to use place content because that is easy, and it's easy but difficult. It's easy as a testing environment and as a thing to play with, but at the same time, it's probably the one where, with coordinate systems and positioning stuff on the original document and so on, where we will have to explain a little bit of how these things work. So that is good. So we will use that. And then what I said was, well, you have templates and you should use them. And in order to get the templates, go to github.com/callassoftware, and then either use the website or immediately /place content. And that gives you this thing where you have a template that you can start from, and just download it. And then the next session that we do, I still have to determine when it is. But the next session we'll do, what we will do is start with a very simple template, and then I will gradually explain to you how these things work. What is the HTML that we can use? How do we deal with coordinate systems? Because the HTML coordinate system is different than a PDF coordinate system. How do we deal with page sizes? What is the default page size that pdfToolbox uses? If I put penguins on there, why do my penguins not show up when I run my fix-up the first time? Because I guarantee you that it will be wrong. Yeah, why is that? How do I fix it? And so on. So that is what I plan to do the next session. Any questions before we're done here? Please unmute yourself and speak up if that's the case. And then if not, I have to look at when we have time to do this next session, but I will do that, and I will communicate it probably in the forum. So make sure you're registered in the forum as well, please. Questions? No questions. Good. That either means that everything was clear, or wherever you are, it's very hot and you fell asleep. Both are fine.
Very clear.
Both are fine.
Question.
Yes.
There is a mechanism to translate for the report.
Yes.
What is the exact procedure there? How does it work? Because when you don't, you can give a translation file. There is also a translation file in the template itself. But what is the sequence that it looks at the languages?
Yeah, it's a good question. Way too long of an answer to give here. So it's probably a topic by itself. In general, when you look at place content, there is no, or you look at pdfChip, there is no predefined translation mechanism, right? So I made this project I was talking about was for a Danish company. So I made something that can generate invoices, and they wanted invoices either in Danish or in English. Mm-hmm. And so in order to do that, I had to make a template for pdfChip that implemented its own translation mechanism. And that exists. There are libraries like, I always forget the name, I8 and whatever. I don't know who came up with that name, but it's also a developer. But there are JavaScript libraries that allow you to do translation quite well, actually. But in pdfChip, you have to do it, right? In place content, if you would want to do translation, you have to do it. There is no predefined mechanism. The only exception is actually Preflight. During the Preflight step, pdfToolbox has its own built-in translation yeah, translation files. You can see them if you go to the CLI. I'm still sharing, so I can actually show things. That's very surprising. Okay, so if I would go to here, and I go to the folder where you have the CLI, and then I go to lang. So these are the default language files that are part of the CLI. And actually, this also explains which languages we have, if you understand the language code. So Czech, Danish, German, English, Spanish, and so on. And we have Japanese, Korean, 2 types of Chinese. Some of these translations are better than others. There is what Callas calls active translations and well, I guess inactive translations. Active translations are completely up to date. Inactive translations, some of those are part of the integration or the work that Callas does with Adobe, where some of the translations come from Adobe, but are not always necessarily updated all that frequently, and so on. But there is a built-in mechanism to do the translation. And on top of that, there is a mechanism to add your own translation. So you can ask for a file with all the English strings, and then you could add, I don't know, Romanian. I don't speak Romanian, but Romanian. It sounds a little bit like Italian sometimes, so maybe you can guess some words. But so you can create a file, and then when you pre-flight, you can tell pdfToolbox, please also look at this file, and then it will look at its own translation mechanism and at your file. Your file always takes precedence in that case, right? So you could even use it in a way to improve the translations by saying, oh, I like this, but whoever translated it doesn't understand what bleed is in French, which is probably true. And so let me overwrite that with a technical term that my customers will understand. And then that will take precedence over the thing that is in the default translation mechanism. Now, on top of all of that, of course, you don't have to use the translations that are in pdfToolbox. You can just do your own thing. If you look at the, I think actually, if you look at the templates, the pre-flight templates, there is an CSS attribute, I think, that is assigned to elements. And only if they have that attribute is that element translated, is it looked up in the translation memory. But you can also implement your own translation engine and just completely ignore what pdfToolbox does. That would also be an option. And in some cases, you have to kind of do something at least, because of course, the only thing that pdfToolbox has in its translation memory is all of the stuff that it knows it has to translate for all of the standard profiles and standard templates and so on. And so if you have your own pre-flight templates that has a bunch of texts that pdfToolbox has never heard of, then it's not going to work, and you need to provide your own translation. The exact mechanism would take too long to explain. We can do a session about that specifically, especially if there are specific questions you have about it. And to be honest, I don't know it by heart either. I would have to look it up and ask. But in general, that's how it works. So there are translations, but it's only on the pre-flight side, not for place content or pdfChip. If you want something translated there, your responsibility. Does it make sense? It will have to, because it's the only answer I have. Cool. If there are no other questions, then I think we are done. We're pretty close to 1 hour. That's not bad. So thank you for joining for this third one. I am not sure yet if the next one will be next week. I will make a decision soon. Probably it will be a little bit longer, but I will let you know and then get them scheduled. Like I said, make sure that you are on the forum.callassoftware.com, and that way you don't miss it when I post the next one. And then I will see you again. And in the meantime, I will also edit the video and also make that available. The other 2 videos, I think I posted something on the forum about that. If not, I will still do so. The other 2 videos are available. They still need to be edited a little bit because we have this intro and extra thing, and I'm not very good at video editing. So I want someone to do that for me, and then they will be posted on YouTube as well. They're not on YouTube yet. Thank you very much. And
thank you, David. Appreciate it.
Very, very welcome. And
Thank you.
We'll see you next time. Enjoy the not so hot temperature if you're in Belgium. I can't guarantee that for every other place in the world, but enjoy. It's 5. Have a drink, some food, and enjoy the evening.